Hello, welcome to Learning for Love, Lessons for Life. I am Lisa Jaworski, and I'm so pleased that you've joined us today. We have a very special episode. We're talking about roles, routines, and physical activity, and I have the perfect guests on to speak about this subject. Both of them have their own personal experiences plus professional experience to share with us today. And especially when it comes to talking about the sandwich generation and how we can best care for our loved ones and finding the time to do that, these two guests will be able to speak perfectly to that. So I have Clara Fitzgerald, who we'll meet in a little while, and Patrick Fleming to start us off. So Patrick, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for the invitation, Lisa.
So I wanted you to be on because I am aware that you have quite a dedicated routine that you follow through on, I want to say daily, but I'm going to let you speak to that a little bit more. But before we get into that, I'm wondering if you can somehow help us understand how you can relate to caregiving and what that looks like for you, if you've kind of ever experienced this before in your own life.
Sure. On a personal level, I'm a husband, a spouse, and I'm a parent of several children. However, they've all grown up and thank goodness have left home. However, once a parent, always a parent, though your level of care changes, but it's always there. Professionally, I'm a social worker. And, for several years, I've worked in geriatric mental health and have had, a really unique experience of responding to the mental health and physical health needs of multiple and very unique individuals. And so with that, working with them, trying to listen and understand what their needs are and being flexible and open and understanding and supportive to those needs.
Right.
So in that sense, it's now I've kept home and work, very separate from each other, but each needs issues of care and care response. Yes.
Yeah. So both professionally, you have caregiving roles,
yes,
and also in your personal life. And I think we might have talked before about compassion fatigue. And I think that's a real thing that we experience in our personal lives and professional lives when we're caring for other people in whatever respect that is.
Yes, that's true. And, and sometimes, especially caring professionals can be a little blind to that.
Yeah.
They feel that they can do everything and anything, but we do need to be sensitive to that and find ways of pacing ourselves. Also appreciating that, especially with mental health issues and working with individuals and their mental health issues, ultimately it is they have the ownership of that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't. We're there to help support them and work with them in compassionate and appropriate ways.
Yeah.
But if we try to own everyone's issues, then you're going to burn out pretty quickly.
Yeah, you bring up some really good points, and I think Clara might be talking about a little bit about what you touched on too. About sometimes I think we can take over or own too much of a situation when we're working with other individuals. So I love that you mentioned that. Now, I have to get right into asking you about, if you're willing to share a little bit about your personal practices, your routines. Tell me and the others listening what that looks like and what you do from day to day to keep yourself healthy and well and sane.
Yeah. The sane is questionable, but I think that I'm just as an individual that I'm a fairly positive individual. So it's looking at, how can we work with things? How can we, and when challenges occur, then what can we do to find a way of moving through that, and also over the years making sure that I didn't feel isolated and alone. So it's building partnerships, it's reaching out to other agencies and partners in the community, and how can we work together to make differences for the individuals that we're responding to and caring for.
That's wonderful. And I also know, so the fact that this show is about roles, routines, and physical activity, I also wonder if you'd share a little bit. It sounds like the consistency and the routines that you've established over the many years that you've been working where you are, that you also have developed some wonderful habits over your own personal break times. I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit more.
Sure. So, certainly, and I appreciate in the questions that you forwarded, it was like when, how old were you when you first thought that physical or regular exercise was healthy? And, of course, as I wrote notes for myself, I mean, at age 5, I started playing organized sports and then had the opportunity as I was growing up to play become involved in a number of different sports and athletic activities, and did that all through high school and university, and knowing that and running started to become an issue of conditioning for those variety of different sports as part of my conditioning. Once I left university and the formal sports ended, it was important for me to continue to do the running.
Hmm.
And so that has been a part of my daily routine. Unfortunately, my colleagues at work never see me at noon. So,
But that might be a good thing too for you,
to,
right? It's, I think,
yeah,
setting some boundaries in order for you
right,
to enjoy your job so much for so
right.
long.
So it's getting up early in the morning and getting some other the stretches and upper body exercises done before coming to work, and then running at noon. And part of that was also as my children were growing up, and especially when they were younger, and the natural demands that go with young families. I did things during the time of day when it wouldn't interfere with my time with them. So early in the morning while they were still asleep, running at noontime at work just allowed me to do those things. And then when I came home at night, then the caregiving and okay, what activities were they
Right.
doing? Were we going out as a family? The other was as a family. We were going out and we were hiking and cycling and canoeing and camping and doing and having the kids in different activities themselves and getting them there. So it was having fun with them and enjoying those kinds of activities together. So all of that just continued to really clarify for me the importance of doing those things. And of course, now that I'm clearing my throat, moving into my aging years, older years, because with uh, London's definition of an older adult is 55 and older. I've long since passed the 55. It's even more important for me to continue to remain physically active so that my joints, bone density, cardiovascular, neurocognitive,
Yeah.
and mood will all continue to benefit from maintaining regular exercising. Yeah.
You've said some key things here, and I think the fact that not only are you finding time to fit in physical activity when it doesn't necessarily interrupt your family life, so fitting it in the morning and at lunchtime, but also the fact that you make physical activity fun for your children and your family, and that you're doing leisure activities on your own, but it's not things you have to do. It's for the fun of it and the family time,
Right.
which I love. And I think sometimes we think of physical activity in ways of, you know, that we have to do it because it's so important for our brain health and for our physical health, that it's more of a task and a job than it is enjoyable, where yes, maybe
Right.
there's a need for that, but there's a way to also make it fun.
Fun. Right. Right. Yes. Yeah. Especially on those humidex of 40 degrees and going out for a run, that can feel fun.
Yeah.
During that. And the nice thing, the nice thing is that all of my adult children continued in their 30s and 20s now, continue to be physically active and healthy themselves. So it's nice to see that that the attempt of role modeling and so on has paid
Exactly.
off. Yeah.
Yeah, you've been a wonderful role model and an influence for them, which is so important, I think. Well, thank you, Pat, so much. I hope that you stick around and just pause there while I bring Clara on to chat. And then at the end, I want us both, for all three of us, to join up together and talk, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So, Clara Fitzgerald, I'm really happy to have you on the show with us today. Thank you for joining me.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
I wanted to have you on because of your experience, both professional and personal, in regards to physical activity. And so my first question for you is, I'm wondering what that looks like. What drew you to work in physical activity and your interest in physical activity? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so I think for me, that's a pretty simple answer. I grew up in a family where my grandparents were a little bit different than the other grandparents. Both my grandparents were very active. I would say my grandfather more so in his work, but as they aged, they always had a level of resiliency and they were robust. And when I was growing up, I would see some of my friends, their grandparents were never around, whereas my grandparents were. And so for me, when I graduated from the University of Toronto and I was studying in physical and health education, it was really clear that I was going to be working in aging, only because at the time it was a novel field. That's my dog that I'm petting here right now. That was a novel field.
I love it.
Really interesting to learn more about aging. And then that sort of was, I would say, the start of my interest in working with older people, having wonderful role models for me growing up.
That's really nice to hear. I don't think we realize enough the influences that we have in our lives, and also how we are always role modeling for others, whether it's our children or the people around us, right?
Right. And I think with that example, it just goes to show how my grandparents probably didn't even realize the impact that they would have on my career choice.
Yeah.
And also then the role that I play as both personally as both a mom to three children and also as a daughter to my parents, to really encourage them also to keep as active as possible as they are well into their 80s. And also within my career, working with varied older adults, not just older adults who already have a sense of well-being and are high functioning, but also those that spend a lot of time at home alone and not necessarily knowing what can they do to maintain or restore their functional potential so that it actually has an impact on their quality of life. And so I think sometimes when we think about it, we don't usually hear of older people being prescribed to be active. And although I fully agree, Lisa, that it's so important to find activities that we relate to that are enjoyable, we also need to be mindful of the impact that it has on our overall well-being, and that we have to prioritize physical activity as important as healthy eating, sleeping well, maintaining our social circles, etc.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I wanted to really focus in on the fact that it's roles, routines, and physical activity, because I believe that physical activity needs to be one of those things that's almost automatic. Well, it is automatic for us to do. So whether you enjoy it or you don't, I think it's good to make opportunities where it's enjoyable for sure. That's really important. But there's also the key piece that there's a lot of the times that we don't want to, like Pat was talking about, the 40-degree days where you don't want to go out for a run, but carving out time where you do physical activity, I agree with you. I think we have to prioritize it, don't we?
Mm-hmm. It's so important. And I think as well, my children are, two are still in university and one has graduated, and all three of them played high level sports. And so I think sometimes as a parent, we contribute a lot to the engagement of our children in activities, taking them to activities, ensuring that they're enrolled in activities. But we also need to be mindful of the time that we're investing in their engagement in those activities. What are we also doing for ourselves? So being in that sandwich generation, unless we really also engage in our own physical activity, the kids will see, well, like mom's not even active or dad's not even active. But when they see that you're active as well, it just becomes part of life.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's so much to be said for that. I know even in my personal experience, when I come down, we have a little workout room, but whenever I come down, I usually have somebody following me I'll go, why don't you do it with me? And it's a good way to even spend that together time. Sometimes they want to, sometimes they don't, but it's the fact that I'm doing it and, our family members are doing it, that they see that happening. So I truly believe that that's going to pay off down the road where they'll learn to develop their own, healthy habits. So fingers crossed anyway. So I'm also interested in, you and I have had discussions on learned helplessness. And I wondered if you could speak a little bit about that, because I think in caregiving roles, we tend to maybe overdo our helping role. And this is where I think Pat was kind of touching on this earlier as well, where sometimes I think we own too much of our caregiving role.
Mm-hmm. And I think, it's a topic that I'm very passionate about. I think it's important for us as well in the sandwich generation to be mindful of how much are we doing for others and why? And if we really care for someone, we don't just necessarily do for them when they can do for themselves.
Right.
And so we try to nurture routines and roles that help people to become as self-sufficient and engaged in their overall quality of life. So when you think about as well, perhaps if you're visiting your parents, for example, I live in London, my parents live in Toronto, I visit whatever the routine is that I visit, I may feel obligated because I don't visit so often to do more than I normally would because I'm not there all the time. But it's so important to really make sure that when you're having those visits or when you're engaged with your parents, you don't find yourself doing things for them that they can do for themselves. Because what'll naturally happen is that people, both our parents and our children and others, will learn to do less for themselves. They learn to become more helpless than they really are because we're rewarding that dependency by doing for people. We think like if we came home and someone had dinner made for me and everything is done, how easy and life would be wonderful. But the less we do for ourselves, the less we're fully engaged in our life, the less purpose we have. So I think it's so important. And that speaks also to the other age group, our children, to be mindful not to do too much for them.
Absolutely. Encouraging any type of engagement, making meals on both ends, like both whatever age group we're talking about, empowering them to try and not worrying so much about whether we fail, or doing something wrong. We can easily modify and adapt little activities, right? By reducing steps and encouraging and cueing and all of those good things. Yeah.
Yeah. And Lisa, I think that's a really good point that you just made there is really being mindful of how those experiences, when we try to engage others to live, let's say, this game we call life, it's really about what is the feeling we're creating for those we care about. And so by doing for people, we may be creating a feeling of helplessness, dependency, when really we want to transition that to empowerment. You can do this. Now, there will be times when there will be certain things they can't do. And there are lots of resources out there in the community that we can source out to support them. But as much as possible, when we can help people to tap into their full potential and engage at that level, it creates a feeling. And I don't know, I think for me, when I think about life, it really is about a feeling, right? It's like, how are you left at the end of a visit? How are you left, after a phone call? Or how do you make people feel?
Exactly.
So important.
It's a good way to evaluate. I know we talk about, how do you evaluate if something went well or not? What's the measurement? Well, I think just being able to see the facial expression and being able to see the body language on how a situation goes, can sometimes speak for itself, as well as, of course, asking the person, but making sure that it seems like a team effort rather than, well, you're doing this right, you're doing this wrong, So yeah, I completely agree. Thank you so much, Claire. I really appreciated that conversation. I think it was much needed.
Great, thanks.
So I'm really looking forward to having both Clara and Pat with me back here to talk about a few other little things that came to mind as we had our conversation. And the first one, so welcome back to both of you. The first one is Clara. I'm wondering about when we're talking about physical activity and making it automatic and prioritizing it in our regular routines. Is there a certain amount, like whether it's minutes or how many days or what physical activity looks like at, say, my age and as we age? Is it the same? Can you speak to that a little bit?
I sure can. So in Canada, we're very lucky to have physical activity guidelines for older adults. The physical activity guidelines for older adults are not too different than the guidelines for adults in general. And adults in general is about 18 or 20 plus. And so we know of the various components of fitness, cardio, respiratory fitness activities. We should be spending about 150 minutes a week doing cardio type activities. And that's anything that gets your heart pumping, you sweating, feeling a little warmer. That could be a brisk walk, lots of different activities. And so about 150 minutes of cardio a week. Now, obviously, if you're starting from doing nothing, that might be too much. Now, when I say 150 minutes, that's specifically in relation to cardio type activities. Then we also need to take a look at the two other most important components of fitness based on Canada's physical activity guidelines, and they are strength training and balance training. So really making sure that we engage in strengthening exercises primarily for the larger muscle groups and balance training to reduce risk of falling as we get older. It's certainly not to say that flexibility is not important, but the literature goes to show that from a health benefit, cardio, strength, and balance, and typically in that order, are most important for adults and older adults. So if 150 minutes sounds daunting, start with less, and that's cumulative of the whole week. So it could be in small bouts of 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. The longer you can sustain the duration of that, it's also an indicator of your cardio health. So
yeah, that's really good information. So when you're going for a walk, so say my husband and I go for a walk after dinner time, does that in itself, does it count in that 150 minutes if it's just a walk, or does it only count if you increase your pace?
Well, the good thing is, because you always have to find the good news, is everything counts because you're moving your body. But from a health benefit, you really want to, rev it up a bit.
Yeah.
Maybe make it a little bit more of a brisk walk so that you could actually feel your heart pumping a bit more. If you have a tracking device, you can monitor your progress. I really enjoy tracking devices to make me aware of, the intensity that I'm working at. So an easy acronym to remember is FIT. So frequency, intensity, time and type. How often are you exercising? At what intensity are you doing those activities? What type of exercises? Is it all cardio? No balance, no strength? And what types of exercises should you be including in those different components of fitness?
That's wonderful. That's really helpful. I like that little acronym.
Mm-hmm.
And Pat, I wondered for you if you could maybe just help us understand how. I'm just trying to think about, like, how did you get to make running and your physical activities in the morning? Was it the fact that you just were aware that you wanted to be home for your kids and be home for those other parts that you were able to establish those routines? The reason I ask is because I think that's one of the things that holds us back when people are trying to develop, healthy habits, is staying consistent with it. The consistency is what tricks us, I think. So how were you able to keep it consistent and keep it going for so long?
In being able to do things early in the morning, that's always been a reasonably easy for me, and the fact that it's part of the routine. So through my week, it's not a conversation of am I or do I or whatever. That's just I get up at a certain time. That's the time the alarm goes off, and I'm up and away. Yes, from time to time that gets interrupted.
You don't allow yourself to question.
Well, right. So part of and when the routine stops, so for a variety of reasons, whether from time to time I've had to stop the running because my knees have told me that I need to take a little time off, or there are other issues, or the routine, you go away, so the routine while you're away gets changed a bit. I know after a little bit, my body pretty quickly tells me, come on, we need to get back to, because if when you start up again, it's going to hurt like hell. But it really has been, and I know it's been said in a variety of ways this afternoon, it's a little bit like brushing your teeth. It's a part of your daily routine, and it's not a big conversation. Do I brush my teeth or don't brush my teeth? I want people, so am I going to exercise or not exercise? I just know that that's something that's good for me. And if it's good for me, then it also gives it, and as I was thinking, putting out energy creates energy. So in that sense, I know I'm going to feel better, and it's going to enable me to get through the day and do the things that are important for me to do with everyone around me. And I don't want to go out for a walk and find myself, short of breath, or struggling to do basic daily activities. So part of that too is a little bit of self-care, in that, so I can go out and mow the lawn, rake the leaves. And those are great examples where you can walk quickly with the lawnmower. You can pick up the pace when you're raking the leaves and pick up your heart rate. So there's lots of different day-to-day activities that one does, as opposed to thinking that working out means going to the gym and, stuff like that.
That's right. You can still incorporate physical activity in what makes the most sense for you.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Pat and Clara. This has been a pleasure. I think, we've shared some great ideas on how we don't take over for the loved ones that we have in our lives and the clients or patients that we have, making sure that we just put these important, physical activity and the other benefits, the other activities that are so important for our healthy daily lifestyles, to just incorporate them automatically. Don't question them, is what I'm getting from Pat. 150 minutes or 2.5 hours, I think that is a week, making sure that we do maybe 10 minutes and more to get the best benefit out of it. And I think this is all great information that I'm really happy we had today. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. That was lots of fun.
Oh, good. It was for me too. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Learning for Love, Lessons for Life, and hopefully you've taken away some great ideas and the importance of roles, routines, and physical activity. Thanks so much. Take care.